Hello, I'm Jay, owner of Volunteer Audio in Oliver Springs, Tennessee, and today we're going to take this beautiful Onyx Pearl 2024 Street Glide, and we're going to add our new Kenwood modified amp setup. So we're going to take that factory amp, we're going to piggyback an 80 watt by 2 RMS amp behind it. So we're going to go from the 9 watts that the factory put out to about 10 times the power, and we're going to put a set of Hertz SX165 Neos into fairing. Watch this video, I'll show you just how easy it is, how you can do this in just a couple hours and make a huge difference where you can finally hear your radio heading down the road. All right, so the first step before we get started, we want to protect our bike. So we're going to put a fender protector on the front fender in case we drop any tools while we're doing this. If you don't have the Harley specific fender protector, lay a heavy towel over that front fender. Just put something there for some cushion. And just in case you drop or slip and have something fall, we don't want to scratch or dent that front fender. All right, next step, we're going to get it electrically ready. So what we're going to do is I'm going to pull this side bag loose, and we're going to pull the main fuse in the side panel. Let me get it off and I'll show you exactly how we're going to do that. All right, so in behind, once we take our bag off, as simple as we just did that, we're just going to pull this side electrical cover off. And in behind this little rubber cover is a 60 amp fuse. Now this is going to be a little different than what you would probably expect. We're actually going to turn our ignition on, so our bike powers up, and then we're going to pull this fuse. By doing so, we just cut everything off. We're not going to have any check engine lights or weird things that happen at the end. And it's going to make it where when we disconnect our battery, if there's an alarm on the bike, it's also not going to go off and chirp at us the whole time. All right, let's move on to our fairing. We'll get it took apart. We'll show you how the amp goes. We'll show you how to get the gas tank off, the seat off, and how to run your power and ground back to the back. All right, so let me go over what you're going to get in the box when you order your upgrade kit from volunteeraudio.com. Now, this is our plug-and-play package, and it's going to come with a specific amplifier that we actually modify and build in-house. So we take the Kenwood Exelon amp that's meant for the 14 to 23s, and we have to do some modification. We actually have to add an amp turn-on wire, and we build you this harnessing, so it's completely plug and play. It's going to be really simple. You'll see when we get to the install that this really just Velcros on top of the stock amp. We take our clutch side and brake side speaker pods. We're just going to unplug them, plug these in place, and we're going to run power and ground back to the battery. The only wire we're going to tap in the fairing is an amp turn-on wire. I'm going to show you how to do that with a 3M posi tap. This is an approved tap that doesn't actually cut the wiring, so it doesn't void any warranties, but it allows us to grab the P&A fuse or an accessory circuit to turn our amp on. This amp is one of the few amps you can do this with that works well because it has circuitry in it that actually helps with the 14 decibel bass boost the factory amp has. If you throw just any other amp behind it, you have to put a DSP and try to fix that bass boost. That's all built into the amp at a very low cost. Now, we also are going to have a much more expensive option coming out from Hertz. It is going to be a higher priced option. It removes the factory amp completely, but it's going to allow you to run up to 8 speakers off of the same amp. This is going to be limited to 2 speakers. This is a budget build to get you where you can hear your music. It's going to sound great. We'll have the other one for the guys that want the way over the top. Now we're going to give you also a power and ground cable. It's already pre-made to run from the battery up to the front that's going to plug in. And we're going to give you some zip ties to secure your wiring, along with either Hertz or Kenwood speakers that mount right in the fairing with no modification. Now, as we get to the end, we'll go over this again, but you definitely want to check out the paper that we send in your kit and set the EQ in the stock radio just like this. There's no longer any reason to flash the stock radio. You can do the latest software updates to your infotainment system. That's great to get it where it's a little less buggy. But at the end, go to your custom EQ, set it as you see in the picture we send you, and we'll go over that a little later in the video as well. All right, let's get the bike apart, and I'll show you how all this fits in the bike. All right, so we're going to start disassembly of our fairing. We're going to take a T25 Torx. Yes, some of these bolts of T27 will fit in, but a T25 will actually fit into all of them. First step we're going to do is we're going to remove our 4 screws from around the top of the windshield. Now, each one of these has a little rubber bushing on it, so keep up with that bushing as well, because it's going to be reinstalled as we go back together. All right, so it's good to have a plastic tray organizer of some sort to put all your bolts in. So as you take your bolts out, drop them all in place, keeps them organized, and at the end, once all your bolts are no longer in the tray, you know you've put them all back in. Now, once you've got your 4 bolts out of the windshield, you're simply just going to lift and kind of slide up out of these grooves. Set it to the side, make sure it doesn't get hurt. All right, same driver. We're gonna drop it in to the 4 Torx bolts that we have here now left, holding our little windshield brackets on. We're just gonna set this part over to the side. Organize those bolts as well. All right, so now on this front trim panel here where our vent is, you're gonna see there's one more Torx bolt kind of hidden just right underneath this little lever. So let's go ahead and remove it out. Now we're just going to take and pull this toward us and release 2 push clips that are in it. See those 2 clips on the back side. I'm not going to remove these till the end. So next we're going to move to the face here, to the inner fairing. I want you to rotate your upper mirrors, and I want you to remove the Torx bolt that is behind your mirror. Now some of these we've run into are actually cross-threaded and very tight from the factory. So if you see that, it's pretty normal. We just try to clean the threads up on it as we go back together. So we're going to remove the upper bolts and the lower bolts. We're going to look and make sure they are the same length. Now in the middle, we have another bolt right here that we're going to be taking off. That bolt is going to be a shorter bolt in the middle. Now one more, while you're on this side, there's one holding your speaker grill in place. We want to remove that one Torx T25 at the bottom of the speaker grill. Keeping up with the length of all of these screws because they are different because they're going to go into different places. All right, so now as we look here, we have a short one that goes in our grill, kind of a medium length that's going to go in the center hole, and 2 longer ones that go on the top and the bottom hole. So now that we took the screw out of the grill, we're just going to pull out on it, and there's going to be a couple plastic push clips that are going to release. All right, so we've got a top clip. The other one just flung off into the floor. Snap it back in place where it goes. We're going to have 2 push clips that we're just pulling out and 1 screw in the bottom. Go ahead and take that off, set it aside. Let's go to our other side and let's do the same thing again. All right, rotating our mirror just for better access to this bolt. And then our last bolt, the one in the speaker grill, taking it out. All right, so at this point, we're going to go ahead and unplug the headlight connector. So this bottom plug here is going to go to the headlights. We're just going to reach in and push this little press-in clip, and we're going to release it. Now it's unplugged. So that is our headlight that goes into our outer fairing. All right, so now the only thing still left holding us are the 2 bolts at the top here on each side. This makes it pretty easy. I want you to stand in front, kind of put your body against the fairing so it doesn't fall off. Taking that same T25 Torx, we're going to remove both of these bolts. Now they have some little retainers to kind of help hold them in place. They won't try to fall out of the fairing. Once you have both of those loose, you're just going to take your fairing. You've already unplugged your headlight. We're going to set it over to the side. All right, now that we have our outer fairing off, we're going to go ahead and remove our seat to get ready to pull our gas tank to run our power and ground wire. This has just a squeeze backrest. Got it out of there quick. We're going to remove one of the Torx, same T25. We'll remove the Torx screw that holds this little strap over our seat. We have another T25 in the back. Now, if you want a little more secure way of keeping your seat on your bike, we do offer the Robert Becker seat locks. They're the same thread, they'll go in, but it makes it where somebody can't easily steal your seat with a regular screwdriver. It would require a key. They're built here in the US, they're an amazing product, and as you know, these seats are not cheap, and a lot of you have bought even nicer seats that cost even more, and it's bad that we live in a world we got to worry about it, but somebody will steal your seat if you don't have a good lock on it. All right, so here at the base or the back of our fuel tank, we're going to see that we have a vent line that runs here. I want you to go ahead and take and just pull that vent line or that rubber loose from here. We're going to have another one at the front of the gas tank. Same thing, you're going to see 2 lines. One has a clamp, one does not. We're going to take the one without the clamp and we're going to pull it loose here as well. That's going to be, it's a little tight on the rubber. We're just going to slide it out. We're going to remove these little rubber caps off the front bolts on each side of our gas tank. All right, so we're going to disconnect our fuel line It's actually pretty simple on these. It may drip a little bit of gas, but it auto shuts off once you release it. All right, so normally this is a really simple process. I've done hundreds and hundreds. We do 300 or 400 bikes a year. I've done a bunch of the new ones already. This one's been a little tighter than normal. There's this little chrome sleeve. You got to slide it up. For some reason, this was kind of locked. I just had to get it loose with a screwdriver. But once you lift this little sleeve upward, it releases the fuel line where it will slide downward. And when it comes out, it automatically shuts the fuel line off. So you don't have to worry about it leaking fuel everywhere. But normally, it comes right out. Very, very easy. And this one is really stiff and a little harder for some reason. But there you go. Fuel line is disconnected and out and shut off. I always take a little rag for a couple drops that might come out and dry that off. But this sleeve is very tight on this one. Normally, it's not nearly that hard. But you know what happens when you video. You run into things harder than normal. All right, so one more thing. We have a fuel sending unit under the tank we need to unplug. Then we'll remove our 4 bolts that hold our tank, and we'll set our tank over to the side. All right, so right here under the tank, you're going to have a plug-in, very similar to that headlight plug-in. You just press this little black clip and slide it out. That's going to disconnect our fuel sending unit. Now we're going to unbolt the gas tank and set it to the side. Not a hard process. Remove the 13mm bolts from each side of the front and then at the back of the gas tank as well. All right, so Harley did something a little tricky on us. This tank has a vent that runs from the front all the way to the back, and it clips into the frame in 2 little plastic clips. So as you pick the gas tank up, you have to reach under and unclip those 2 lines where they go on. All right, so that's this line right here. I just unclipped it with my hand. We'll show you that here a little better here in a second. Let me set this gas tank over to the side. These are the 2 clips I was just talking about. So as I lifted up, I just lifted that vent. I just pushed it up where it unclipped out of those to set our gas tank over. All right, so just continuing in preparation to run our power wire up to our amp. We're going to cut a couple zip ties that are here under the gas tank that have now been exposed. We don't have to reinstall these. These were just for assembly, going down the assembly line. So what we're going to do is we're going to expose what we call our backbone area. That's where all the factory wiring run. That's where we're going to run our wiring as well. All right, so there are going to be a couple runs of tested tape run across here. So we're just going to cut the side of that tape with a razor blade. That cut, you're just going to lift it up, peel it over. We'll slide that back over here at the end before we put our tank back on. All right, so now that we have that tape undone, we're also going to take these brake lines. These are our ABS brake lines. We're going to take it out of its holders here, just moving it over to the side. And then we're going to grab and just lift under the bottom edge of this plastic cover, so you can get some of these clips undone. Once you get a couple undone, you can just kind of wiggle back and forth and they'll all release all the way to the front, exposing that factory wiring channel we need to run our power and ground up. All right, so at this point, I'm going to show you just how simple it is to put our amp in place. So we're going to just take the Velcro that's on it. Now make sure your factory amplifier location is clean. This is a brand new bike, so it's all pretty spotless. But if not, you want to clean the top of the amp with some isopropyl alcohol. You do have plenty of height here for this amp to sit right on top of this Rockford Fosgate factory amplifier. So we're just going to stick it in here and just stick it right on top like you see here. Now we're going to have 2 labeled connections. One says brake, one says clutch. The brake one is going to run to the side of your bike where your brake handle is. The other one's going to go to where the clutch handle is. It's pretty simple to do. What we're going to do is we're going to take these cables, we're going to drop it in one of these holes that just feeds down next to our speaker pod. And down here, we're just going to unclip that out of the side of that frame Christmas tree bracket for a second. We're going to unplug these, and these are what we're going to plug our new cabling into. Now, just so it's cleaner, I'm going to run it down through the side here. It's a little harder to see, but it's definitely the better place to go with it because you're not going to have it all running toward the headlight side. Just kind of fishing those plugs down through this hole. All right, so there's one of them. Here's the second one. Now you'll notice these actually made up to those speaker connections on the pod, and they're going to plug right in here. Now if you've replaced your handlebars, this is all you have to do because you can actually change your speakers through the speaker grill openings if you have taller bars. Now, if you have the factory bars, we will have to actually remove the speaker pod and unbolt it, which means we're going to unplug this one more time to get it out of the way to get our speaker in. I'll show you that here in a second as we go through, but I'm assuming some of you have already changed your bars, so I'm doing it in this order for that manner. So this little blue one, we're going to ignore. It's for expansion to a second amp, which we don't have. We don't have room to fit the second amp in this bike, but we're going to do the same thing over here. We're just going to drop this speaker wire down the side of the speaker pod. There's actually a gap there. Let us feed it down to where our speakers are, where speaker connections are. This is the one that says clutch side. Same thing here. I'm just going to unplug the connector, plug the mating ones in where they plug in. So this one into the pod, and that one back in. So now we've made all of our speaker connections just that simple. We've connected up our speakers on both sides, input and output to our amplifier. All we have left now is the power and ground to go to the back, as well as our amp turn-on wires. So I want to show you that now. Our amp turn-on wire is a very simple process. There's actually a wire ran into the fairing for accessories, but Harley didn't continue to run it and pin it. They ran it to this plug-in right here at the back of the little storage pocket. So we're going to unclip this and slide it out where we can get to it, and we're going to unplug it. I'm unplugging it just to get a better view to show you the wiring. So I'm going to take a razor blade. I'm going to trim this back just a little bit so I get access to the wires. We're not cutting the actual wires. We're just trimming our sheathing so that we can view them and we can see them. So now as we pull this back, you're going to see in this plug there's a purple wire with a blue stripe. It's actually the third one back from this corner. If you look at your other plug, it doesn't continue through. There's actually a blank where it is. So if you wanted to, you could unpin this blank and you could pin a wire in and you could hook up that way. But we're using a 3M, what they call Posi-Tap. It's a really cool little device that doesn't cause any problems, and it makes it very, very easy to tap onto this factory wire. So we're going to take the black end, which has a little groove in it. We're going to wrap it around this purple wire, just like so. We're then going to take the other red part and we're going to thread it over it and just tighten it up. As you do, it sends a little piercing probe into that wire. Now on the other side, we have a little barrel that we're going to loosen up. We just want it in here loose. We're going to take the blue wire from our amp. We're going to push it into that barrel. After we've got it pushed in, we just tighten this down and it locks that wire in place. So just that easy. We've got a tap to turn our amp on. We're just going to slide our plug in right back where it was. All right. So we haven't cut any factory wiring. We didn't void any factory warranties. We now have us a wire that's ran over here to turn it on. Next, we'll run our power and ground up from our battery. Last, I'll show you how to do the speakers because you may or may not have to remove the pods. All right, so I'm going to show you how to access the battery. It's really an easy process to hook up our power and ground cable that came with our amplifier. So first, we're going to just undo a couple things. We have our antenna here that picks up our key. We're just going to slide it forward so it releases. We're going to do the same thing with our second plug here. It'll actually slide and release as well. Somebody's had this out and actually put them in the wrong place. Normally this is here, antenna's in the middle. We're going to unplug the wiring that goes back to our tail lights. Just plug that so we've got a little bit more room here. And now we're going to unclip this plastic tray from the front of the battery here. So unclip it in the front, that's going to let it come loose, and it's going to allow us to lay it over to the side. Now on previous Harleys, this would have been where our ECM was. This is actually our body control module, and the reason we had you pull that fuse in the beginning, this is actually where the tilt sensor is to let the bike know if you've laid the bike over. So if you take this loose and you stand it up and it's powered up, it'll think that you actually just crashed your bike, and it will store some codes in that are a little harder to reset. So we pulled that fuse so it won't know as we pull this back that we weren't actually in a wreck. All right, so once that is pulled back out of the way, we have another Torx bolt here. We're just going to use our T25 and take this last portion off the top of our battery to get access to this positive post. So we took that off, we're going to slide it over. Now we pulled that main fuse earlier, so really nothing is connected to the battery. It's going to have any draw. We're going to take a Phillips driver and we're going to take loose our positive post. We're going to take our red wire that has our fuse in it, and we're going to reinstall it on that side. And we're going to take our negative lead, and we're going to do the same thing on the other post. So our black wire with the ring is going to go on your negative terminal. All right, so at this point, we're going to start going back together with our battery tray. Torx bolt back in, cover back on. We'll drop our BCM back in where it goes. It just slides under, pushes down and clips. That's back where it goes. Now at this point, I'm going to go ahead and take our wire that we just connected to our battery, and I'm just going to lay it in this backbone tray all the way up through here with the original wiring. I'm going to run it up to about here. Now I'm going to cross over because I want to go up the left side into our fairing. I'm going to go and snap that plastic cover back over, making sure that we lift our tape out of the way that was on it earlier. So starting at the front, I'm just going to snap it back in place. All right, so all that is snapped in. Take my tape and lay it back over where it was. Then I'm going to take my brake lines and I'm going to feed them back into these little plastic retainers and put them all back right where they were, making sure they're still clipped in up here at the front. So when our gas tank goes back on, nothing's going to interfere. All right, so now that that's back on, I'm going to go back together with this portion. We're just going to take this little plastic cover. It slides back in under the rear of the battery tray tie down, and it snaps in the front. Now each one of these is actually labeled. So we're going to take the one that says antenna, and we're going to slide our antenna back in place there. That's what picks up your key fob. I'm going to take the accessory plug. Same thing with it. Starting at the front, sliding it back. Plug our tail light connector back in as well. And as you see, it's very clean. You can't even tell we added that on. So now we can actually go back together with our gas tank and our seat if we want to. But I'm going to show you how to route that power wire into the fairing and where it's going to go to plug in. So let's go back up here to the front corner. Now remember, we also included a few zip ties, so you can zip tie this stuff as you go. But what I normally do is I'm going to take this little plastic piece of trim here. I'm going to pull out at the bottom and I'm going to slide it forward, which is going to release it. I'm then going to take and run my power just like that factory wire does, right in behind this piece of plastic trim. I'm going to pull all my excess into the fairing. Once it's in here, just like that wire, same thing. We'll pull out on the front, push forward so I can get this tab to fall back in place and bring it back down. Now I would normally tell you, go ahead and take a zip tie and secure right here at the front of the gas tank. All right, so taking a zip tie, going here. Flush cutting it. All right, so at this point, I'm going to go ahead and put my gas tank back on. I just like it back on the bike. I'm going to go ahead and put it back where it goes, get everything clipped back in, bolt it in, and then we'll move back into the fairing. I'm going to take my gas tank, I'm going to slide it back in place, but I'm going to reach underneath to each one of those little clips, and I'm going to snap this vent back into where it goes. Something you really just have to do by feel, because you can't see it once the gas tank's there. All right, so I've got both of those snapped back in place. I'm going to go ahead and plug my front vent back in. I'm going to make sure that before I bolt it in, that both of my lines are behind this metal tab where the bolts go, and they're in place here in the right place. So I'm going to start a couple of the bolts in the back. Not going to tighten them at all yet. I'm going to go up to the front and line them up. Again, making sure both of these lines are behind this metal tab. Lift it up and start the front one. I'm going to go and start my other one, and then I'll tighten them all four down. Now we're going to take our little rubber caps that go on the front of our gas tank, slide them back over the bolts. All right, so now we have to reconnect our fuel line and our fuel sending unit to finish up our gas tank. All right, so take that plug, go back underneath here, plug it back in where it was. A little difficult to see what you're doing. I'm sorry you can't see it, but you'll be able to see it better in person as far as how this lines up. Next is our fuel line. So all you do is lift up on that little chrome sleeve, push up on the fuel line. When the sleeve drops back in, you're reconnected. All right, so now moving back to the front, we're gonna route this power wire up to our amplifier. So I'm gonna bring it around a few of these lines, just making sure I've got more of a direct shot. And I'm gonna feed it up like we did those other wires up between this gap beside our speaker pod. Bring it up in here, just plug it in here. Now we've got you several zip ties that we sent you. So just take a little bit of the excess you have here, lay it across here, and zip tie it in place. So this setup only works with the small, what they call the 200 watt factory amp. If you have the 500 watt amp, it actually has enough output that it's not great to listen to, but too much to feed into an amp without having a lot of floor noise and hiss. This amplifier, even though it's very weak and it's only 9 watts, it's very clean, and so we don't have a lot of noise that we're feeding into our new amp. And our end result seems to be really, really good. We've done this hundreds of times at this point, and it sounds amazing. But just that simple, we got our amp turn-on wire routed and connected. We also have our power and ground connected. We have all our speaker wires connected. At this point, the amp installation is done. We just have to put our speakers in, and we have to put our fairing back on. Now again, if you had aftermarket bars, you can actually change the speakers without pulling the pods. The pods are not hard to take off, but I'm gonna show you, I think we can change this one either way without pulling the pods. So I'm gonna go ahead and unbolt it, even with the factory handlebars. So it's a Torx T25. Remove your 4 screws holding your speaker in place. Now this speaker is terrible. They use the same speaker they did in all the older Harleys. It's just a 5 1/4 and a 6 1/2 inch frame, and it has basically no magnet. It's really embarrassing how small it is. So we're just gonna pull it out enough that we can unplug both of our speaker connections. Now let's get our new speaker out and compare them. All right, so let's look at both of these speakers. We have the factory speaker, which has this smaller 5 1/4 inch woofer. Our new Hertz speaker is waterproof. It is a true 6 1/2 inch. And as you notice, it's not only a bigger woofer, it's a bigger tweeter as well. But it does have a neodymium magnet. Let me remove the silica gel out of the back here. You'll see it has a much larger neodymium magnet. So it's very, very powerful, very strong, handles a ton of power. These will handle about 200 watts. Factory speaker, 15, 20 watts, and they've pretty well had it. But it's also ready, not only will it work with this Kenwood setup, it works with our bigger Hertz amp solution too. So if you decided in the short term to buy the economical package with the Hertz speakers and the Kenwood amp, get it where you can hear it well, and then later you decide to upgrade to our bigger Hertz amp in the future, these speakers would still work, would still be a great option. And these are 4 ohm speakers, and a lot of people ask me, well, the factories were 2 ohm. The Kenwoods you offer are 2 ohm. Well, these 4 ohm are so efficient that they're still louder than the Kenwood speaker option. They're louder than any of the other 2 ohm options that we have. And yet it's very, very, very clean. It's very easy on the amplifier. The amplifier doesn't draw as much power because all that ohm load is the load the amp sees. The higher the ohm load, the less load it sees, and the amp actually works easier. It's easier on it, doesn't get as hot, doesn't pull as much amperage, easier on the electrical system and so on. So we prefer 4 ohm speakers in most cases. Now I'm going to show you how to get this connected here. Anytime we're putting speakers in the fairing of a Harley, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a pair of pliers and I'm going to squeeze each one of these speaker terminals a little tighter, because from the factory the terminal is really thick, and most speakers it's going to seem like they're loose on it. We don't want this to come unplugged. So we're going to take our Hertz speaker. It's labeled positive and negative. The black connector is going to go on the negative. The clear connector is going to go on the positive. And then we're going to kind of rotate this speaker into this hole, very similar to what you saw as we took out the other one. There's a clip here we've got to get around. It's almost a little bit of a puzzle. Now we're going to rotate the speaker so that our terminals are facing downward. Getting it into the hole, there we go. So we're just going to line up our holes. It's a direct drop-in replacement. I really don't believe there's any reason to remove the speaker pod on this side of the bike. Even though we've got the fairing off, it's not hard to remove it. This is easier. So I'll start all 4 of our screws. So factory hardware goes right back in. Speaker goes right in with no modification, no cutting of the pods. Even though we're going to a larger speaker that's going to have a much better sound. Very, very easy install. All right, so we got that speaker changed out. Now on the other side, what actually hinders you is the handlebars have your clutch reservoir, your brake fluid reservoir. It gets in the way with the short bars. As your bars get taller, they also come out this way, which gives you more room, makes this very easy. So I'm going to show you in this case how to remove this front speaker pod. It's not a hard task either. I'll show you how to do that so that you can easily do this without causing any damage to anything. All right, so we're going to pop our GPS antenna off of our speaker pod. Just going to pry it up here and get it loose. We'll stick it back on later. All right, so we're going to take a T30 and we're going to remove the bolts on the front speaker pod. I'm going to go with the hardest one first. It's the one on the inside. So we're going to remove this one all the way. A little bit of a long bolt there. I'm going to go ahead and remove this other one from this angle. Now there are 2 that are a little harder at the back of the radio. I'll move to those next. All right, so if you had aftermarket bars, you didn't have to do this step. But because this one has factory bars, we're removing this pod. I'm going to unplug this factory radio plug. As you see, I slid it up, this yellow connector, to unplug it. Now at this point, I'm going to go ahead and unvelcro our amp from earlier. Just kind of move it over to give me more room to get my screwdriver in. And I've got a Torx up here at the top. Same T30. I have another one down here at the bottom. Now, if your driver won't fit in like you just saw me do, I just got it loose. If you could use just a T30 socket on a wrench or a ratchet. Just going to go by hand and remove it the rest of the way. And really, it's out more than enough to do what we've got to do. So I'm going to leave it partially in there. I'm going to remove 2 more on the outside. Now, these so far have been the same length. The longer ones are going to go from the pod to this framework. The short ones you're going to remove are going to be the outside of the speaker pod. So this inside one, once I got those loose, I could slide my speaker pod out a little bit. And that just made it easier for me to get it loose. But I think I got enough room now to change my speaker. So I'm going to move to the front. We're going to take our T25 and just remove our 4 speaker screws now. Just going to take our speaker. We're going to just kind of twirl it around to where it'll let us come out the hole. These are a little bit of a puzzle. A lot of times you got to get this top edge out first. Oh, and our speaker falls out. Let's go ahead and unplug it the rest of the way. Same thing as before. We're just going to take a pair of pliers. Again, we're going to squeeze this terminal tighter. All right, to take the last couple threads out of this bolt, just to make this easier for you to see, I'm going to use a wobble with a T30. Sometimes we try not to take all the bolts out, and it makes it harder than if we would have just done it. So, all right, so we got our pod loose. I'm going to take it all the way off. All right, so again, I've already tightened these terminals, but now I've got it where you can see a little bit better what we're doing. We're going to take our clear one. We're going to put it on the positive. And the black one is the negative. That speaker's going to drop right in place. Put our screws back in. This is really a very simple installation. Probably the hardest part is taking this pod off, and even that's not hard. All right, so back over to the bike. We're going to first feed our wire back in where it goes. It's important that we get it lined up. I'm going to get one thread or so on this, the harder bolt. All right, so now I'll grab my tool and I'll tighten it a little bit more. All right, I'm going to tighten the other ones or get all the other ones started before we tighten anything all the way down. Get our speaker pod in position where it goes. Rotates to right there. Remembering our longer T30s are the ones that go into this framework. I'll start the rest of those. All right, our last longer one's going to go here in the top of this pod. All right, let's get our outside screws back in place. These are going to be the shorter ones. All of our speaker pod bolts are back in place. Now, we don't want to forget to plug back in the connectors that we unplugged earlier. So let me stick my amp back up where it goes. Let's Velcro it right back on. Take our GPS antenna, pull it out to where it will go back. Actually, let's plug our radio back in first. Start your connector and just push that down. It'll lock it in. GPS antenna stuck back in place. And then we're going to plug in our speaker wiring. All right, so at this point our pod is back on, all the bolts are back in, our Hertz speaker's in place on both sides. We're gonna take our outer fairing, put it back on, and continue to go back together. This is definitely one of the easier fairings to go on and off with. You'll see your headlight wire in there. Make sure it's just to the right of the forks there. Drop this right back on in place. And going back with our T25 on our upper bolt here. Go ahead and start these on each side. Now I'm not gonna tighten these till I get a few more in place, making sure everything went right where it's supposed to go. I'll grab my two long bolts for each side and start those back. Now you'll notice that a lot of times there'll be marks on them because I think from the factory they get them a little cross-threaded as they're going in, and then they just send them in with a tool. So far I've run into quite a few of these that bind up as they go in, but these are going in all right on this one. But if you see that, it's pretty common on the new bikes. After I got my two long ones, I'm going to go with the middle side screw that we had right in the middle. I'm going to pop my speaker grill back on. Same thing on the other side. Longer screws in the top and bottom holes. And here we are. One of them's going to bind up. I saw this one when we started. As we took it out, you can notice the end of it has actually been through a lot. It looks like somebody has already cross-threaded it. The owner of the bike actually warned me about it when he dropped it off, telling me that he thought it was that way from the factory, and I would agree with him because our Roadglide was the same way on one of the bolts on it. But if you'll go the opposite direction, just work it backwards, you'll hear it fall in like you just heard on that click, and it just started no problem. So no longer is it cross-threaded. It's going in like it should. We're going to take our middle length bolt, go in the middle. All right, let's put our grill back on. So I'm going to go back to the front of the fairing and I'm going to go ahead and tighten up those two bolts that we didn't tighten all the way earlier. Then we're going to go back together with the rest of the trim around our windshield. Trim piece. Let it snap back in. Put its retainer back. All right, now we've got those in. Let's slide our windshield back in place. Windshield has these two little holes that just slide in. That's going to hold us till we get our 4 screws in. Now you're going to see what looks like little cracks in your windshield. Those are mold marks. They were there when you bought your bike, but you're going to pay attention to them now because you took it in and out. Don't worry, you probably need a different windshield anyways. One of my least favorite things about this bike is the windshield. I think it needs a little bit more sealing on the edges, a little bit more kick up. Clockworks and a couple other companies already make a good one. But don't think that you have to do it because of those cracks, because it's not actually cracked. All right, so our fairings all back together. We're gonna move on. I'm gonna put at this point in time, we can go ahead and put our fuse back in place in our side panel. So we're just gonna put it back in. Snap our cover back over. And now I wanna put our side panel back in place. Put our bag back on we removed earlier. All right, it's time to put our seat back on. The seat's gonna have a little hole here in the front that lines up with this. We're gonna start toward the back, sliding it forward so that locks in. Put our screw in the rear of the seat. Put our leather strap back in place, feed the bottom of it in to the groove where it goes. So, our bike is completely back together. The next step is we're going to go into the radio. We're going to go to the custom EQ. We're going to set it just like we show you in the directions that you get from us. So that factory radio does have a huge bass boost in it. Our amp is taking care of a good portion of that for us. But we can do even better by setting the settings in the radio correct. We'll fire it up. All right, so now that our radio has fully booted up, I'm going to go ahead and go into our settings menu. We're going to press the button over here to go to settings. Go up into settings, go down to audio or sound. We're going to go down to EQ to custom. Pick the custom option. Then we're going to try to make that match what we have in our picture. So we're going to go all the way up with the first three. We're going to go one notch past there, and then we're going to come up here in between. So as you notice in our picture, we now match. We're going to connect our music up. We're going to take a listen to it, but it's going to sound amazing. That's all it is. We've already preset at Volunteer Audio. Before we ship to you, we pre-wire the amp. We also preset the gain, so there's no settings for you to do. Simply run that power and ground up and plug it in the speaker pods, follow this video to a T, and it's going to sound amazing when we get done. All right, so we're completely done. EQ set, phone's connected. I'm going to play a little rock track that is a copyright-free track, just so you can hear how loud and how clear it is. All right, so before we could turn it all the way up, we could stand here and we could have a conversation, and you would have heard me very, very clearly. Afterwards, as you see, it is much, much louder. It's loud, but it's clear. It sounds really good musically. It's got a good full tone. It's got some good mid bass and good, clean, crisp highs. I think that if you do this to your bike, you'll be overly impressed with how awesome it sounds for the amount of work and the cost to do this. Now, keep watching Volunteer Audio. We have many new solutions coming for these new bikes. And there's a couple things that they really need. They need an audio upgrade. They need exhaust. We got the Chromeworks exhaust that makes them sound phenomenal as well. We're gonna have a lot of things coming out for your bike. So if you want to do more than 2 speakers, keep an eye out for that new Hertz package. We have our own A to B interface that completely replaces that stock amp and puts a 1,000-watt amplifier in the pharynx, 1,000 RMS, 2,000-watt peak, and that'll run up to 8 speakers. But if you, like so many others, just want to be able to hear it going down the road, 2 speakers is your plan, this is the correct solution for you as well. Well, thank you so much for watching Volunteer Audio. Definitely subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on Facebook for the latest in Harley audio. As new products come out, we're going to show them to you. We're going to show you how to install them. We're going to show you how to use them to make sure you get the most out of your purchase. Also, like this video. By doing so, it's going to move us up in search results. It's free to you, and it helps other people find the video that they need to help them do that correct upgrade to their bike also. And I hope this has encouraged you and it's helped you and allowed you to do the upgrade that you've been wanting to do and save a bunch of money on labor by doing it yourself. Thank you so much for watching. If you have questions about this package, if you want to see everything that we offer for your bike, you can go to volunteeraudio.com, check out our motorcycle category, look at our plug-and-play amp and speaker packages. But if you want to talk to a person that's super knowledgeable and helpful, give our sales staff a call. 1-844-30-AUDIO. We'll be happy to talk to you about your budget, your bike, your build, put together that perfect package for you. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, God bless.